A difference of half a cent is too small for anyone to respect and just large enough to reorganize a life. At first, it does not look like a life at all. It looks like a browser tab left open after work. It looks like one exchange rate on a bank page, another on a remittance app, a third whispered across a counter under tired fluorescent light. Two currencies, two clocks, two cities that pretend not to be speaking to each other. You notice the gap before you understand the meaning of it. Then you notice it again the next morning, and again that night, and soon the spread begins following you the way a melody follows someone who has heard it once and cannot scrape it loose. You tell yourself it is temporary. A distortion, a mismatch between official confidence and private fear. Governments speak one price. Streets speak another. Banks pretend settlement is frictionless. Men with envelopes know better. Every market produces its own hidden grammar. And once you hear it, ordinary commerce starts sounding theatrical. The posted rate is for tourists, for compliance officers, for people who have never had to move value through a weekend, a sanctions rumor, a power cut, or a line outside an ATM that curls around the building before dawn. So you begin small. That is how almost every dangerous thing begins. Not with ambition, but with a test. One transfer routed through a cousin abroad. One cash pickup in a pharmacy where the clerk never looks surprised. One walk across 3 blocks carrying nothing visible and feeling, for the first time, the peculiar pressure of invisible money. You buy in one currency where it is treated cheaply. You sell in another where it is needed urgently. The margin is thin. The feeling is not. The first successful loop does something to your nerves. It teaches you that the world has seams. It teaches you that prices are not facts. They are negotiations backed by force, fear, and timing. In the beginning, the operation fits inside ordinary objects. A second phone, a notebook with numbers disguised as grocery totals, rubber bands, a worn messenger bag that never looks worth stealing. You learn which kiosks change their rates after lunch, and which ones lag by 20 minutes, because the owner refuses to trust apps. You learn that the best information often arrives sideways, through a taxi driver, a student landing from abroad, a jeweler who keeps one eye on gold and the other on central bank statements. You learn that speed matters, but discretion matters more. The spread rewards motion. Survival rewards stillness. Most people imagine arbitrage as clean intelligence. Screens, equations, efficient profit. They picture a mind moving faster than markets. But your version smells like paper, diesel, sweat, printer ink, old carpet, and cheap coffee gone cold. Beside a counting machine, it depends less on brilliance than on choreography. Who picks up first? Who waits? Which booth has actual cash? Which account is under review? Which payment processor freezes transfers without warning? Which relative can be trusted with a package? And which one begins speaking too loudly after his second drink? A tiny operation survives, not because it is elegant, but because it remembers the human weaknesses hidden inside every system. Soon, you stop measuring days and hours and start measuring them in windows. 27 minutes before one market wakes, 14 minutes before another reacts. The 7-minute silence, after a rumor breaks, when everyone hesitates and rates become liquid with fear. You sit at a table in the half-light before sunrise, screens open, ledger open, city still holding its breath, and you feel as if you are listening to machinery inside a wall. When the opportunity comes, it is never majestic, just a number blinking in one place and lagging in another. You move. Calls. Messages. Confirmations. A runner on a scooter. A deposit slip under a glass tray. Then waiting, which is the true occupation underneath every trade. Waiting changes you before profit does. It teaches suspicion as a reflex. A delayed message becomes a possible betrayal. A frozen app becomes an omen. A customs checkpoint up the road becomes a direct threat to a transaction that technically does not exist. You begin carrying silence the way other people carry keys. Friends ask where you have been. You say work. Family asks why you look tired. You say nothing. The operation has no language that fits easily at dinner. To explain it honestly, you would have to explain why certain laws feel imaginary until the hour they do not. Why 2 currencies can turn a cautious person into a courier, and why making money from a price difference never feels like earning so much as slipping through an administrative crack before someone pours concrete into it. The first time you hold enough cash to frighten yourself, the room seems to shrink around it. It is not cinematic. No orchestra. No triumph. Just banknotes under a towel on a kitchen table, the fan clicking overhead, the air thick with the smell of dust and cotton fiber, and your own hands suddenly less trustworthy than they were yesterday. Money at that scale becomes an object with weather. It heats the room. It bends attention around itself. You count it twice. Then again, not because you doubt arithmetic, but because fear makes repetition feel like control. By then, the operation has acquired other people. That is when it becomes real. A cashier who alerts you when the official side drifts. A woman at a travel agency who knows who needs hard currency for tuition, surgery, exit. A retired accountant who can reconcile 3 contradictory records without leaving a trace of panic on the page. A motorcycle courier with bad knees and perfect punctuality. None of them think of themselves as criminals. Most of them think of themselves as practical. That distinction matters to everyone until pressure arrives. Then, language hardens. Arbitrage becomes illicit dealing. Liquidity becomes laundering. Service becomes conspiracy. The machine chooses its vocabulary after it chooses its targets. Still, you continue because the money is real, and more than that, the competence is intoxicating. There is a private grandeur in becoming useful where institutions have failed. Clients come to you because banks are slow, because policy is delusional, because borders interrupt lives more easily than needs. A parent has fees due in a foreign city. An importer cannot wait for official approval while inventory dies in a port. A nurse wants to preserve 6 months of wages before inflation chews through them. You tell yourself you are not exploiting disorder. You are translating around it. Sometimes that is even true. But every operation accumulates ghosts. They arrive as details you cannot file away. The student whose tuition clears one day too late. The man who lies about why he needs the transfer, then vanishes with borrowed settlement. The woman who unfolds cash from a medicine envelope and asks twice whether the rate is final because this is all she has left. You start to understand that a spread is never just a spread. It is pressure made visible somewhere. Always, one side of the trade is urgency. One side is fear. The numbers on your screen look sterile. The motives behind them never are. As the months pass, your world narrows and deepens. You stop seeing neighborhoods as neighborhoods. They become corridors of settlement, choke points, cameras, exits, institutions with different appetites for scrutiny. Rain matters. Election speeches matter. New banking software matters. A holiday in one country and a funeral in another can distort volume for reasons no model would predict. You learn the temperament of cues. You learn the tone of a banker who has noticed you without admitting it. You learn that every profitable pattern contains the seed of its own extinction, because once enough desperate or clever people notice the same opening, someone powerful eventually decides the opening is the problem. The turning point does not announce itself. It arrives like bad weather, incremental, and difficult to prove. A compliance review on an account that always passed. A booth owner asking for extra identification he never needed before. A client calling from an unfamiliar number because his usual messaging platform has been blocked. A rumor that one of the couriers was stopped and questioned, then released, which is somehow more unsettling than an arrest. Release means observation. Release means patience on the other side. Release means your operation has entered the field of vision of people who can afford to wait longer than you can. From there, every motion contains an echo. You begin checking mirrors without drama. You start splitting transactions smaller, then smaller again, until efficiency is eaten alive by caution. Profit thins. Stress thickens. Sleep turns technical. Even rest becomes monitoring. You lie awake rehearsing mundane details with prosecutorial precision, timestamps, routes, names used, names avoided, how many times you visited the same branch in 1 week, whether the camera above the cashier actually worked or merely discouraged imagination. The second phone on the table stops looking like a tool and starts looking like evidence that has not been assigned a file number yet. This is the part outsiders never picture. Not the chase, but the erosion. No dramatic collapse, no instant punishment. Just the long tax of vigilance. The operation begins collecting pieces of you that have nothing to do with money. Appetite, patience, ease. Your attention becomes permanently collateralized. You cannot fully listen to anyone because some corner of your mind is still calculating settlement risk. You cannot fully relax in public because every crowded room now contains unknown variables. You cannot even enjoy the wins the way you once did because mature fear has a discipline that youthful excitement lacks. It knows every profitable day creates a record of habits. And yet, the world keeps demanding the service. That is the deepest trap. Even as you grow tired of the machinery grows more necessary to others. A shock in one currency, a shortage in the other, a new rule announced at noon, denied by evening, enforced the next morning. Clients come in with the stunned expression of people who have just discovered that official systems do not love them back. You recognize that look because you once mistook your own recognition for opportunity rather than initiation. They need speed, discretion, conversion, rescue. You provide it because refusing them feels moral only in theory. In practice, refusal also has a body count. The last good month is always invisible while you are living in it. Later, you will try to identify the exact hour the operation passed its peak. But systems like yours do not break with ceremony. They sour. Margins compress. Reliable partners become hesitant. New faces appear offering better routes, better rates, better scale, and you know enough by then to hear the hollow spaces inside those promises. Greed no longer looks like hunger. It looks like impatience with safeguards that once kept everyone alive. You start saying no more often. That is how you discover that saying no can isolate you faster than any raid. By then, even language begins to split in two. There is the public vocabulary you use for safety, and the private one you reserve for people inside the circuit. In public, you are helping with payments, assisting families, smoothing transfers, managing delays. In private, you are hunting spreads, feeding routes, covering gaps, patching trust with cash and timing. The double speech does more than protect you, it edits you. After enough repetition, you stop knowing which description is the confession and which is the disguise. That confusion is dangerous. A person can survive risk for years if risk remains external. What destroys judgment is intimacy with justification. The more convincingly you narrate necessity, the easier it becomes to overlook appetite. And appetite, in a business built on tiny differences, does not arrive wearing a villain's face. It arrives as a small extension of acceptable risk. One more transfer after midnight. One more client you should refuse. One more promise that you can still control the size of the fire. By the time you notice the smoke in your own voice, you have already mistaken endurance for discipline and secrecy, for professionalism for too long. One evening, carrying a sum that would have thrilled the earlier version of you, you stop beneath a dead street lamp and realize you are no longer thinking about the money. You are thinking about what your face must look like to strangers, how practiced your neutrality has become, how instinctively you position your body near exits, how quickly you scan shoes, hands, parked cars, reflected movement in shop windows. The operation has migrated inward. It is no longer something you run. It is a method your nervous system now uses to interpret the world. That is when the cost becomes undeniable, not when danger appears, but when danger becomes your native grammar. What follows is not an ending so much as a reduction. A few accounts closed, a few routes abandoned. One trusted intermediary leaving the country for reasons he does not explain. You tell clients you are slowing down, then tell yourself the same thing, though both statements are carefully imprecise. Small operations rarely end with a clean switch thrown off. They dissolve into smaller favors, residual contacts, emergency requests, answered out of loyalty or guilt. Even after you mean to stop, value keeps finding your number. Need is stubborn, so is reputation. Years later, certain objects still retain the charge. The buzz of fluorescent lights in a service corridor. The soft slap of counted banknotes against a desk. 2 clocks on one wall showing cities with different anxieties. The sterile optimism of an official exchange rate posted in bold print. You can leave the routes, the screens, the runners, the improvised ledgers, and still carry the arrangement inside you. Because what changed you was never only the money, it was proximity to the seam itself. The place where law, necessity, fear, and ingenuity meet and pretend, for a few minutes at a time, to be the same thing. And that is the final cruelty of a small arbitrage operation between two currencies. From the outside, it looks like exploiting a discrepancy. From the inside, it feels like living beside a fault line and learning to profit from the tremors. You tell yourself you are only measuring spread, only moving value, only borrowing time from rigid systems that deserve to be outmaneuvered. But the work leaves a residue finer than dust. It settles into posture, sleep, trust, memory. Long after the rates close and the phones go dark, some part of you remains awake, listening for a number to blink out of place, wondering whether survival was ever different from noticing first and moving before the wall remembers it was supposed to be solid.